So the American scones, quite a high proportion of butter. Okay, so kind of a 2-to-1 ratio of flour to butter, I would say. Okay. Oh, hi. Yeah, we're just starting. You can join us. Yeah. So that means today we're using 250 grams of flour. For American scones, you're looking at something like 125 grams of butter, which is like quite a bit. Okay. But you'll see that the amount of butter we're using today is actually only 40 grams. Okay. So you're not going to get that same kind of flaky, crumbly texture, okay, but it's still going to be a light, fluffy scone and not too sweet. Okay. So yeah, I'll quickly talk through the ingredients before we begin. In this bowl, okay, are all of the dry ingredients that we have pre-measured for you already. Okay, so they're the same amounts that are stated in your recipe. Okay, your recipe says to make 8 scones.
What do you mean by strong?
Yeah, so I'll explain the 2 types of flours that are in here. There's a strong flour and a cake flour. Okay? So American flours typically are classified by the amount of protein, okay, that's in the flour. Okay? So the more protein there is, the more gluten there is. So for strong flour, it's a high gluten flour. Okay? Simply means high gluten, more protein inside. Do you need a pen for now?
Yeah.
If you need a pen, just give
you.
me a shout. I'll give you a pen. Anyone else? Yeah. So high protein. Okay. So if you look in the packaging, okay, there's always a little table with what's inside the flour, and there's all protein content. Okay. So high protein flour is normally about 12% protein or above. Okay. It's sometimes also called bread flour. So if you're at a supermarket and you see bread flour, that's the same thing as strong flour. Okay? And then cake flour is the opposite. It's a low gluten flour, low protein, so it means that you reserve it for things that are lighter, fluffier in texture. Okay? So strong flour is more suitable for bread. Okay? So you need a stronger structure, you need a chewy texture. Okay? But the only reason why, after all that, I mean, it's good to learn the differences, but after all that, the only reason why we are mixing these two is because we only stock these 2 kind of flours here. Okay? That's only kind of 2 kinds you got. Okay? So we don't have anything that's in the middle. Okay? So by mixing the high and low, we get something in the middle. Okay? Medium gluten. Okay? So that's like all-purpose flour. Yeah, so if you've got all-purpose flour at home, which I think most people, that's what they'll have if they have flour at home, okay, then use 250 grams of all-purpose, okay? And it will be pretty much the same result as what we're getting here today, okay?
Sorry, can I ask, do you think it's better to use 250 grams of all-purpose flour, or do you think a mix of 2 flours is better?
It's honestly, no, same. Yeah, because it'll work out to roughly the same amount of protein.
Okay.
Yeah. And then there's also some sugar. Okay, 40 grams of sugar. It looks like a lot in the bowl, but honestly, like we're making 8 scones. So each scone is not going to be that sweet in the end. Okay. And then there's also some baking powder. Okay, so baking powder is what's going to help your scones to rise. Okay. So I think 2.5 teaspoons is what your recipe says. That if you're going to be measuring by weight, it's about 12 grams. 12 grams of baking powder. Okay. And that's it, really. They're very simple ingredients for scones. And the wet things, yeah, here in this jug, 100 grams of full-fat milk. Okay. I get asked, can I sell plant-based milk alternatives, etc. Yes, you can, but obviously, bear in mind, it's not going to be the same result. Maybe different colors, like different texture, but it does work. I've had people use soy milk, and it works. Okay. And then there's also an egg inside, cracked in there, you'll see. Okay, so the first thing we're actually going to do is we have a tray between 2 people with some tools inside. Okay, so the first thing we need is fork. There should be 2 forks inside. Just grab the fork. And we're just going to give the egg in here a mix. So just pretend you're making scrambled eggs. You're just going to break that egg up. Set that aside. Okay, and we're going to use that later. So next thing we're going to do now is just grab these scrapers, also from the tray, round one and a straight one. Okay, so we're just going to use the round one first. Yeah, so locate these.
You're doing a live stream. You're doing a live stream.
No, I'm just doing a video. I want to, but
Okay, so yes, we're going to use the brown one first, okay? And then we're just going to mix all the dry ingredients together in the bowl.
So do you always use this to stir rather than a spoon?
Honestly, if that's all you have at home, use a spoon.
It doesn't make
It doesn't make it. We just like these scrapers, especially for bread making, because this particular fits this bowl just nicely, the shape, yeah. So it's actually very helpful. But you know, if you don't have these scrapers at home, just use something else. Yeah, you use a spatula, use a spoon.
I was just wondering if I've been doing it wrong the whole time.
All right, then you can set your scraper aside, and we're ready for the final ingredient, okay, which is the butter. Okay, so it's on the recipe, okay, but I haven't put it out. I haven't set it out, and the reason is because we need this butter to be super cold for this next step. All right, so at home, you would do the same thing, okay? You would prepare your butter by cutting it up into small cubes like this, like the butter I'm giving you now. And when you're just about to use it, okay? Because this step calls for very cold butter, right? Yeah, so you can take your scraper out first, set it aside, because next step we're gonna move to our fingers, okay? And I just want you to use your fingertips only, okay? Because we don't wanna melt the butter too quickly. So, just going to use our fingertips and just put all of the butter from the bowl inside our flour. Yeah. Yeah. Once it's all in there, okay, you're just going to move them around, toss it around, and coat each piece with some flour. Okay. Yeah. So make sure each piece is covered with flour. If some pieces are stuck together, yeah, of course, break it apart and coat each one with flour. And once you're done that, you're going to start what we call rubbing in. Okay, so it's literally rubbing fat into the dry ingredients. Okay, so you take a piece of butter in your fingertips, between your fingertips, you're going to crush it like this. So smush it, and then just put it back in. Okay, then toss it around, pick up another piece, smush it, put it back in. Okay, so yeah, so it's just rubbing in. It's called 蒸, okay? 蒸调料. Yeah. So you're gonna keep doing this over and over again, okay? Until each piece of butter becomes so small that you can't see it in the bowl anymore. Okay, so your bowl at the end, once you're done rubbing everything in, is going to just look like a bowl of flour. Okay, or some recipes will describe it as fine breadcrumbs. Okay, so basically, yes, even though after you rub this piece once, it just becomes flat. Eventually, you know, you're going to go back to the same piece and rub it again and again. So it's going to all break down, okay, into tiny pieces. And so the reason why we have a very cold depth is because you can imagine, okay, if you try to rub with very warm room temperature butter, that's not really going to work. Okay? And the reason why I said just coat everything first with some flour is because the flour coating will also prevent it from sort of melting too quickly. Okay? And thirdly, just working with fingertips only, okay, is also going to help because our hands are warm. So, you know, the more you contact the butter, the quicker it will melt. And fingertip is generally the coolest part of our hand. Yeah. So I'm just using one hand, but if you don't mind getting both hands dirty, then you can also just go in with both hands as well. I just have this habit of keeping one hand to pick up the phone or whatever happens, you know, in the middle of this. If you have a, we call it pastry cutter at home, okay, you can also use a pastry cutter, okay. Some people even like to use a knife, okay, to cut it in. If you're super lazy, you can even bust out a food processor if you have one, okay, and just chuck everything in there, blitz it a few times, and get all the pieces very small. Okay. But-
Do you think it affects like the quality of the scones if you're
I think with scones, it doesn't really matter because you want everything to be tiny pieces, okay? But for something like a pie pastry, okay, where you're going to be employing a similar method of rubbing in, you might want to do it with your hands, okay? Because for a pie pastry, especially if you're wanting to make a very flaky pie pastry, okay, then you really want some irregular pieces of butter size, okay? Especially some very large chunks. Okay, because those large chunks of butter in your pastry, when they go into the oven to bake, the steam, okay, evaporates from the water content from the butter, and those steam will create pockets of air in your pastry, okay, and that's what makes it flaky.
okay.
So you'll achieve that with some big pieces of butter, but for scones, we're not really looking for that same kind of flaky pie texture, so it's okay to get it down to very small pieces, and hence it's, even using food processor is fine. But sometimes if you're making, pie pastry, I get a bit, because you might overdo it and then you have no more big pieces of butter. Okay, so once you feel like shouldn't be any more big pieces left, then just dig around, okay? Maybe at the bottom there's still some, okay? I like to pick up some and I sift it through my fingers, okay? Just to see if I can still find some big pieces, okay? I think mine's looking good, and I'm gonna stop. As soon as you think it's done, just stop, Otherwise, the more you touch it, the more it becomes. So you see, now everything is like a flour. Okay, I don't see any big pieces anymore. Yeah, so my bowl has just become like flour. Yeah. Yeah, good. Yeah. Yeah, so make sure you don't just do the same spot over and over again. See, it's already melting the butter. So toss it around, coat around, and then dig. 係直情已經同一個位咧，就會越嚟越溶，係啦。Yeah, that looks good. Yeah, okay, I think most of us are there. Yeah. Let's see. There's still some big pieces. Yeah, so you need to find big pieces and smush it down. So while you guys are just finishing off with your rubbing in, okay, I want you to think about the scone flavor you want to make today. Okay, so we've got either a choice of keeping it plain, okay, and if you want to keep it plain, then you can also add some fillings. Okay, so we have some chocolate chips, some raisins, some cranberries if you want to put it in. Okay, otherwise you can also leave plain. The other option is a savory scone. So if you'd like to make a cheese and onion scone, we'll give you some onion powder and Parmesan cheese. Okay? But it's like, you can't go like half-half. So you just stick to like either the same thing per batch.